that many of you have of leading others, sharing life with others, accompanying others in your communities. So I'm not going to repeat so many deep insights that Lynn shared with us yesterday. She spoke about hospitality, enabling our members, our fellow sisters to belong, to be able to recognize that they can be themselves. They are called to grow as well within this capacity of creating safe places, safe environments in our communities, made out of listening, of welcoming, learning to be with our feelings and also to live well with others' feelings. There's so much. So, Lynn, thank you so much. Thank you for expertise, for sharing it with us. And I'll give the floor to you again. And please lead us again on these taking selfies to ourselves so that we can continue to learn our emotions, how to live with our emotions, and how to accompany ourselves and others. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to be back. I'm just grateful that UISG provides this opportunity. You know, it's absolutely thrilling to look at the number of participants, the number of you who are here and from all over the world. And this is where technology is helping us. And I'm grateful for UISG and this opportunity. You know, leadership is not easy these days. And so anything we can do to help us to be leaders, to help accompany our sisters, new members and current members. And so that's what these days are about, learning about how emotions play such an important role and how it's important to be aware of and accepting of and understanding of our emotional life. And then, of course, how to express our emotional life in a way that is helpful to ourselves and to others. So one of the things I thought would be helpful, I went through a list of common feelings, emotions that you experience as a leader. And part of the reason why I'm doing this today is that it's so important that you understand, and I understand, there are many emotions that we experience as human persons and as leaders. And one of the things we always want to be able to do is to name the reality honestly. To name the reality honestly. And I'm just going to say one other thing about that. Your role as a leader is to name the reality honestly, the reality of your community, of your congregation, the reality of helping a sister who's in front of you, who is struggling or is concerned about something. So naming the reality honestly is a role of leadership in many ways. And one way is to name your own reality with regard to how you feel and then what you could do with those feelings. I know we talked yesterday, it's one thing to name something, but it's also important to suggest some how to. What do I do when? You know. So hopefully today will be naming and some suggestions about how to respond. I said at the beginning of the handout there, the paper that you have, you know, this is a stressful time. And there are many issues and questions that you face as leaders, regardless of where you are or who's in your congregation or the size of your congregation or where your congregation ministers. And it can be difficult to manage our feelings However, it's so important that we do so, that we get better at understanding, awareness and acceptance and understanding, and then choosing how to respond. And so I think if you can just kind of consider that this morning, you have a choice about what to do with your feelings. I think sometimes we think, well, their feelings have a life of their own, and there's nothing I can do. And I want to say that's not true, and invite you to think more about what choices you have. So I made a list of feelings, and we're going to go through them one by one because these are not always easy. Now, remember, we said yesterday, or I'll ask you a question: is there such a thing as a negative feeling? And I hope you're all shaking your head. No, we don't have negative feelings. We have challenging feelings or difficult feelings that some feelings we don't, like more than others, but there are no such things as negative feelings. So let's start with frustration and irritation. Let's start with that. So why do I feel frustrated? I mean, what's frustration trying to tell you? What's the message? And basically, it's telling you for some reason you feel stuck or unable to move forward in some way. It may be, that you're trying to accompany one of your sisters, and she doesn't seem open to talking to you about what's happening or the difficulty she's facing. So you feel kind of stuck or unable to move forward. And whatever the reason, and part of what you want to be able to do is to ask yourself, why do I feel stuck? And then you name it as clearly as you can. Sister chooses not to come in and talk about what's happening at the local level, or sister is ill and doesn't want to go to the doctor. So you sort of say, I feel stuck, I feel unable to move forward, and here's why. So it's always good to ask yourself why. And the thing why we want to do that is you want to deal with frustration and irritation as soon as you can. Because if you don't look at it, it builds up and then you become angry. And anger is a little bit more, has more energy, is a little bit more charged. And it's harder sometimes to deal with when we're in a full blown anger than when we're frustrated. So, what are some suggestions? What are some suggestions that might help you when you notice, and that's the important word, you notice that you feel frustrated or irritated? The first thing is, one of the best things you can do is stop and look at the situation and ask yourself the why. So, stop and say, wait a minute. The feelings are mine. I feel frustrated. I'm irritated. So why? And not, she makes me frustrated, or she's doing this and I'm frustrated. So we have to come back to me. Why am I feeling this way? Notice it says, find something positive about the situation. Now that requires a little kind of slowing down a little bit, thinking about a positive aspect. Let me give you an example. I tried to put it there as an example. Supposing someone keeps coming late to a meeting with you. It could be another person on your leadership group. It could be a sister that you meet with and in a regular way. And she comes late for the meeting. And you're frustrated and you're irritated because you have many things to think about. So one of the things you could do is to say to yourself, all right, she's late. That's about her. I'm not going to get irritated and frustrated. And in the time that I have, I'm going to use my time to write a letter, read an email. So in other words, you recognize there's an irritation or a frustration because she's late, but instead of going over and over and over and being more irritated and frustrated, you say, I'm going to use this time. So I'm going to write a note, I'm going to read an email, and then when she comes, I'll deal with her when she gets here. Notice it says, try not to personalize. Think sometimes, sisters, we think she did it because she doesn't like me, or I'm not the best leader, and so she keeps coming late. So we start making it very personal to ourselves instead of saying, she's late. It's about her. I don't know why she's late. I'm going to use my time. I'm going to recognize I feel frustrated, irritated, but I'm not going to focus on the frustration and irritation. I'm going to use my time for what I want to use it for. I'm not going to personalize she's doing it because she doesn't like me or she wants to just be difficult. I'm not going to do that. And then finally, I talk about being curious. That's an interesting thing to do as a leader, to learn to be curious. And here's an example. Do you remember yesterday, one of the sisters said, there seems to be a sister who always sees herself as a victim. Remember that example from yesterday? Well, one of the things you can do, instead of focusing and being irritated and even angry about her being a victim, being curious says something like this. What is it? What has happened in her life that she lives as a victim? Be curious. How could, I wonder where that comes from. Notice the judgment is gone and it's, I'm wondering, I'm curious. What is it that happened to her that she behaves in the present like this? How might I understand where she comes from? Now, in order to be curious, you have to find a little space to open yourself to looking at your sister with maybe some new eyes. Not easy, not easy. So frustration, irritation, fairly normal. Normal feelings when we feel stuck or unable to move. Make sense? So you're not bad if you feel that. You just want to understand, accept, and figure out how to make choices other than building up the frustration and the irritability. Okay. So what about worrying and anxiety? Sisters, this is a time with a lot of uncertainty. There's nothing wrong with you if you think there's so many things that are uncertain in the world, in my life, in the life of my congregation, in my personal life. So uncertainty is the and ambiguity. It's not clear. If it was clearer what we should do, but it's not clear sometimes. So that's why we have feelings of worry, nervousness, and anxiety. So I want to invite you to think about worry as an act of the imagination. So let's say you have a meeting with the bishop. Let's say you're going to have a meeting with your sisters. You're gathering your sisters. And so you might say to yourself, well, how will they respond? What's going to happen when we talk about whatever we're going to talk about at the meeting? Or what will the bishop think when I want to talk to him about our sisters? And so what happens is when we worry, you really are focusing on the worst possible outcome. So worry has a negative outcome, not a positive outcome. It's an act of our imagination. So you're saying, this isn't going to go well. The meeting with the sisters is not going to go well, or they will not agree with our decision. And so worry is a focus on it's not going to go well. And here's the critical piece, and this is so important to understand. When we worry, we're trying to control a situation. Worry is about control. And sisters, we don't have control over others. What will the bishop say when I talk to him about changing a ministry? You don't know what he will say. You only know what you will share. What will the sisters think about this decision that we have made? You don't know how they will respond, but you know how you are. And so, sisters, I think we have to understand, and you have to ask yourself, how much control do I look for in life? And in this time in our life, we need to realize that we don't have control over some situations, and we certainly don't have control about how others will respond. Now, I think we've made control too big an issue. We think we have the control of everything. And in fact, we live in the present moment, and we have skills and abilities at each other to cope with what's coming. So you have to ask yourself, how into control am I? How much control do I think I need? And the more you desire control, the more this is going to be an anxious time for you. So what I want to say is, we're filled with unknowns today in the world where we live. Some of you live in very difficult situations, wars, lots of poverty. It can become a habit of the mind. Now, that's an interesting phrase. We think of habits like I eat sugar when I'm upset, or I drink coffee to wake up in the morning. We have those kinds of habits, but we can have habits of the mind. And worry is something that can take over your life. And so you need to notice if you worry and if you spend a lot of energy worrying. And because here's the critical thing, worry changes nothing. I'm going to say it again. Worry changes nothing. So if you worry for the next half hour, nothing's changed except maybe your mental health. You feel maybe a little depressed. You feel you can't do anything. You lose your energy. You lose your ability to be productive. And it can get you unwilling to take some risks, which, sisters, at this point in our life, in the life of the world, in our life as women religious, taking some risks, trying something new is important for us to move forward. We cannot live in the past. And so the world is asking us to live today, live in the present, try something new, be here, make choices today. And we can't do that if worry is taking over. So, what do you do? What are some suggestions? You ready for some suggestions? All right. The first one says, don't surround yourself with worry and anxiety. And that means you've got to check out your habit of the mind. It isn't good for you to worry, and it isn't good for others to for others either. And it changes nothing. Notice the second one. I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise with me. We don't breathe well sometimes. We just keep going. We keep going. We don't pause. And by breathing in the way I'm going to suggest, it can help calm the anxiousness within us so we can use our heads better. So, you ready to try a little exercise? All right, I'm watching some of you, so I'm going to hope you're going to do this with me. All right. Here's the thing. We need to breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth. But the way I'm going to suggest is it's a little counting, you know? So I'll show you and then I'll talk it through, then I'll show you. We need to breathe in through our nose and we need to count 4 to hold it, you know? So we breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you hold it for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you breathe out through your mouth. You make your mouth like a little funnel. You breathe out through your mouth and you count to 8. 4, 4, 8. All right, I'll show you without using the words. Okay, so I'm going to breathe in 4, hold it 4, breathe out 8. Now, would you try that with me? Breathe in through your nose. I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you learn to do that, it's calming. It helps your body to relax. And then you can use your mind in a better way. So sometimes we need to help our bodies to slow our breathing, and it also slows your heart rate. The third one suggestion I have is focus on how you can improve the situation. Instead of worrying about what will the sisters think, how are they going to respond, what will the bishop think, you can put a little more energy into preparing for the meeting, talking about with one of your other leadership team members, talking about have we done all that we can do to have the meeting be successful? And so sometimes we need to put our energy, put our mind at work, not just our anxiousness at work. Now, I want to talk about one other thing that isn't on your paper. So if you're following along, I was thinking about you last night and this morning. So I want to talk about uncertainty a little bit more. So it's not on your paper, but I'm going to make some suggestions. I think a major skill, a major thing for leaders today is to rise up to the challenge of not knowing, dealing with uncertainty, and how you can be more confident and how you can adapt. So I'm going to make several suggestions because as I was thinking about you as leader, there are uncertainties, there's ambiguity. And so how do you get better at, you didn't cause it, it's just surrounding us, things that we don't know. So the first thing I would suggest is we have to learn how to act without having the complete picture. Now, we don't like that. We want to know everything. We want to know all the details. We want to know how people are going to respond. But sometimes you don't have all of the information. So you do the best you can, and you use what is available, and you make a decision. One of the things that you have, that in your mind you have to understand is, and this is somewhat difficult, sisters, in many situations, there is no right answer. I'm going to say that again. In many situations, there is no right answer. There's only the best answer you and the women you work with can come to. So you do the best you can, and you make the best possible answer, the best possible decision, because you know there is no the right answer. And because, I mean, if there was a right answer, you'd choose it. You know, you're smart women. But sometimes we have to choose the best thing we can come to. And this is part of this time, sometimes we make decisions that could not be the best. And so part of living with ambiguity and uncertainty is a willingness to understand that sometimes our decisions are not the best. And then we look at them and we get more information and we make adjustments, we make changes. I wish it were possible that you have all of the information, you make the best, you make the right decision all of the time. In the time we live, you make the best decision you can and then learn what it teaches you. I think being confident in yourself and the women on your leadership group, that we are going to do everything we can to make the best possible decision. And we listen to advice, we consult with others to make the best possible decision. And then we need to be open to learning what was good about it and maybe what was not so good about it. And then we make adjustments. So the last word I would say here is about adaptability, that we have to be able to adapt to what we find in our decision making. And that's especially true when we deal with ambiguity. I think the last suggestion I wrote down is write down your worries. You may think maybe I don't want to do that, but I think sometimes it's expression, getting them out and looking at them can help us to really let some of the energy go that comes with worry. And then you can go back and deal with whatever you write down. So just another hint. Now, the next one, anger and aggression, is one many women in general, women, and then women religious, find difficult. One of the reasons is we often in the past have experienced anger expressed poorly, out of control anger, anger that was destructive, anger that hurt people. And it's also true, I think, that we think women shouldn't be angry. There's something wrong if women are angry. And so we don't handle this emotion well. Sometimes we're afraid of it. Sometimes we avoid it. But in order to work with people, to accompany, and that's the word we're using, accompanying both new members and current members, you really want to understand and manage your anger, and you want to be able to understand and how to respond to another person's anger, especially your sister's. Now, a couple of things that are really important here, and I just want to focus on this because we need to understand anger better. First of all, anger comes from within you. It's not because someone said or did anything. So anger is your feeling. It belongs to you. So then it's so important to understand where anger comes from. And if you have the handout, you're going to see 3 points, and I'm going to walk you through. So where does my anger come from? Notice what I'm saying. It's my anger. Where is it coming from? The first thing is when I perceive, I see, I believe that you or someone or something is unjust or unfair. So let's use an example of one of your sisters is talking about you and she says something that's unkind. Okay. If in fact she did say something unkind or that's not true, you, in that situation, anger seems a good response. Anger, this is not fair. This is unjust that she said something that's not true. So that's unfair, unjust. Okay. Anger makes sense. But sometimes we see something and it's the way we see it that makes it unjust or unfair. And I become angry when that's not what happened in the situation at all. Let's say you're in your mother house, and one of the sisters walks by you and doesn't greet you, doesn't say anything. She just walks by and keeps going. And your perception, your sense is you personalize, she doesn't respect me. And so if you say she doesn't respect me, then you say that's not just or unfair, and you can become angry. And then you realize afterwards that she just received a phone call from her family and she didn't even see you. She didn't even see you, but your perception, your senses, she doesn't respect me. And as a result, anger can come from what you say to yourself about what happened. So if something is unjust or unfair, anger is a good response. If something is unjust or unfair. And so, we have wars that are happening. We have people being slaughtered. We have people being injured in robberies. Those are unjust. Anger is appropriate. Sometimes, though, we perceive something is unjust and it's not helpful, and we're angry, and it really is because of how I see it, not the reality. So you have to ask, is she really being unjust or unfair? Is this situation? The second reason why good people like me and you get angry is that we expect something and we don't get it. We expect something and we don't get it. And so what's really important here is to ask yourself, am I being reasonable and realistic about what I expect? Or am I expecting perfection? Am I expecting too much? Now, I'll use an example that has nothing to do with a person. It has to do with a thing. Let's say you go into your computer, and most of you are watching online in some kind of laptop or computer, and you turn it on and it doesn't work. And you wanted to be on this Zoom call. And so you could be frustrated, but you also could be angry because what do you expect? You expect when you turn on the computer that it works. And so we expect things to work. We expect people to do what they say. We expect lots of things. And it's okay when we expect something and it doesn't happen, to know that what's the response. Certainly could be irritability, or it could be anger, depending on what the situation is. But here's the thing you want to ask yourself: am I being reasonable and realistic? And here's some key words you want to pay attention to: always and never. If you say, my computer should always work when I turn it on, or the Wi-Fi should always work when I turn it on, depending on where you are, especially with electricity and Wi-Fi, sometimes it doesn't work. And so it's not that you don't want it to work, but you could be angry. Instead of saying to yourself, this is one of those times when our electricity is not good, our Wi-Fi is kind of weak, and you don't have to be outraged and angry. You simply say, the reality is, it doesn't always work when I'd like it to work. That's disappointing at first, but I'm not going to be outraged about it. Okay. And then in this case, supposing it was true about this Zoom call, you have to remind yourself, oh, they're going to record that. I can go and look at it later. So then you give yourself another option. So reasonable, realistic. And sometimes things like electricity or Wi-Fi, we have no control over. So how angry are you going to get? Or do you just say, this is one of those times. I'm disappointed. And what else can I do? What other option do I have? Can I look at the recording? The third reason why people feel angry, you good people like me and you, is you feel you personally are being attacked in some way. Now, if a robber was coming up to you and grabbing your purse or pushed you down, you do feel attacked. And so anger is a good response to that. Sometimes, though, we personalize. We talked about this a few minutes ago. When somebody doesn't agree with us, instead of letting it be about our idea, your suggestion, they say they don't like me. They're attacking me. If someone doesn't agree with your suggestion, that doesn't mean they think you're a terrible person. So sometimes, sisters, we have to be careful. Are we over personalizing it? Are we saying, it's because I'm the leader, they don't, they're disagreeing? Or is it that they're disagreeing because the idea they don't understand, or whatever? So, anger, normal feeling, not negative, happens to the best of us. You want to understand your anger, where it comes from. Is something unjust or unfair? Are your expectations not met? And are they reasonable, realistic? Or do you feel personally attacked? When you understand it, then you make choices. The first thing I suggest is watch for early signs of you becoming angry. If you see it coming, then you can work with it before you're in a full-blown rage and sort of losing control. So, and here's the thing: sometimes our first instinct, our first response is anger. And maybe that's not the best response. And so, can you slow down? can you say, wait a minute. I'm not going to go to anger right now. Can I look at how else I could look at this situation? You know, for example, if you were personalizing it, saying it's because of me, she's saying that, you might say, wait a minute, is it really because of me? So we slow things down and not let anger be the only response. I think we need to stop what we're doing and breathe. So I'll introduce breathing again. It calms our body, our heart rate, helps you to think about things differently. This is an interesting one. Picture yourself when you're angry. Picture yourself, your face is red, your fists are, and you're saying, and I can't believe, picture what you look like. And then ask yourself, do I want to look like that? Now, a lot of times we don't think about what we look like, but that's a good little suggestion. Imagine what you look like. And would you want to look like that, or do you want to be a more calming presence? And then finally, I do think we need to express anger directly when anger is the appropriate feeling. And what I mean by that is, I think we need to say to someone, I'm really angry about what happened, or I'm really irritated and angry with what happened yesterday. When it says, do not be passive, sometimes what we do with anger, a good example that women do, is we stop talking to people and we give them the silent treatment. So now I'm not talking to you for a couple of days. That's not direct expression. Better to say, wait a minute. Let me talk about what I'm feeling. Let me talk to her. Let me talk to them. And instead, sometimes we do indirect things. And then it's hard to figure out what that's about. I'm going to make one other suggestion, and this is new learning. The tone of voice you use sends a big message. So if you asked me, do you think that's a good idea? And I say, yeah, it's a good idea. And you listen to that tone of voice, you can hear the irritation, the frustration. So I hope you don't believe me, because tone of voice is telling you, I don't agree. I don't think it's a good idea. So watch how you say things. And then the other nonverbals, your face, your tone of voice, how you respond, they send big messages. They send a clearer message than your words. So one final thing here. It's so important that your words match your behavior, your face, your body, your tone of voice. They send the real message. Your words are not always what the message is you're sending. So it's so important that you be able to, we call it, be congruent. Your face, your tone of voice, your body match what you say. You don't send a mixed message. Now this next one, and then we'll take a short break after we talk about this, but this next one about disliking and liking. We've all lived with someone, I think, at least I have, or worked with someone that we find difficult to like, or that we like them better than we like somebody else that we work with or live with, or we're attracted to them, etc. So what happens when you're the leader, or really when you're just being you're a person, when you like somebody and really want to show them preference, you prefer, and when you don't like somebody. And as a leader, it's so important that you respect both, that you treat each one fairly, that you be fair and just. And each one of them is in your life for you to become a better person. Now, let me say that last sentence, because sometimes we'd prefer they weren't there. Sometimes the difficult person, the person we don't like, is in your life to help you to become a better person, just as the one that you prefer, the one you're attracted to, the one is in your life to help you to be a better person. There are no mistakes. So, what do you do? What do you do? Before I do that, I want to say to you how important it is that you have a personal life in addition to being in leadership. Let me say that again. It's so important that you have a personal life in addition to being in leadership. And what I mean by that is, in particular, you need to maintain friendships and people that you like being with, you like spending time with, and people who like you. And it has nothing to do with being in leadership. It's about you liking you, you liking them. So, sisters, do not make leadership your life. Do not make leadership your life. You need to have personal relationships of liking and people liking you. And I find this, you want to pay attention because you accompany your formators, the women who are working with new members. They need a personal life. They need to maintain their friendships. They need to be able to leave the novitiate, leave the house of formation, and have time. If not, they can find their emotional energy focused on one of the people in the process of joining. And then they get all mixed up with boundaries. They want to be friends with a person in formation. They can't be friends. They're in a power position, and that's true for you too. So I hope you hear, maintain a personal life, personal relationships, being able to be with people that you're not the leader of. And that's true for the women who accompany new members. Let them have space to have a personal life and be the person who accompanies new members. So, what happens when we like or dislike? What happens? And that's normal stuff. What is one suggestion? Be respectful. If you have to work with someone you don't like, you don't get along with, and that happens, then you have to set aside, your own pride or ego, as it says there, and be courteous, be respectful. Treat them as you would treat anybody else. You know you have a hard time with them. You know they're persons who are difficult for you, and you do your best. The second thing says be assertive. And what I mean by that is you really have to treat them fairly, but that may mean you have to talk with them about how you interact with them. You have to express what works for you. You might say, it would help me when we interact, it would help me if, and then you say what you need. I don't like talking to you in the corridor, in the hallway. It helps me to talk in your office or in my office. So you can set some limits, some ways that work for you, and you can ask for that. And then finally, and you know this, not to show favoritism, but to treat each person fairly. And that includes the person you like, the person who is easier for you. You can't make them special. And this becomes very important, not only in leadership, but people accompanying new members. If you show favoritism, people notice. The other sisters notice. And they will see you as unfair and unjust, and you will not be an effective leader. And we have to help our new members, our leader, excuse me, our formators, the accompaniers with new members to realize they need to be just and fair and not to show favorites, even though they know they like a person or this person is easier for them to be with. So let's pause for a moment here. And here's my question, and then we'll take a little break. The question is, of the feelings we talked about so far, frustration, irritation, worry, uncertainty, anger, dislike, and liking, which one is more difficult for you? Which area is more difficult? And which of these do you do a better job? You know, I'm pretty good at handling, like I'm working on it. I'm pretty good at anxiety, and I'm not so good at anger. So it's just like a little self-evaluation, and you're the only one who knows. So what am I good at? I'm still learning, but I'm good at it. What do I struggle with? And then we'll come back and talk in about, well, 8 to 10 minutes. How's that? Is that okay with you, Paula?
That's all right. Thank you so much, Lynn. So we can have this time of silence, and then we'll be back at 3 minutes past the half an hour. So at 33. That's whatever fuse time we are. Thank you so much, Lynn, for your
Okay.
insights. So we don't go anywhere. We just switch off our mics and videos. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's time. We are back after the break and after reflecting on these questions that Lynn left us. How good are we at dealing with some of the emotions? What are the ones that we find more difficult? Lynn, thank you so much. We continue, please.
Yes, and I want to talk about these last two sections, disappointment and sadness and grief. And then we'll pause a little bit for some interaction, some questions. And then I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about understanding reactions, because sometimes we react, which is not a helpful way of being in relationship with your sisters. So let's talk about disappointment and unhappiness. Again, I think it's always asking the question, why am I disappointed? What am I unhappy about? And sometimes we have to figure that out. We have to, again, inner work, reflection. If my disappointment is my feeling, disappointment is my feeling, where is it coming from? And sometimes it happens because of your own doing or not doing something, and sometimes it happens in interactions with others. And so I just think it's so important, again, that you make time for slowing down, because when we speed up, there's more stress and it doesn't help us. So slowing down, asking why, naming the reality, etc. And then notice my suggestion here. It says, really, if we don't pay attention, then we really can't experience joy. And joy, we're not talking about that today per se, but in order to have that feeling of that uplifts us and helps us, you have to name the reality honestly and accept what's happening in order then to choose to be joyful. So these difficult feelings are related to joy in that sense. So what do we do with disappointment? I think you have to look at expectations again, that things don't always go the way you want them. You planned this meeting, you did everything you could, and things didn't go well. And so I think it's remember that even the best plans don't always come to be what we expected. And I think that whole question of life is really a journey of ups and downs, and to expect those and not to think it's a straight path. Um, and also to remember that the hills and valleys make life interesting, and that's where we are transformed more likely by the ups and downs than by a nice smooth path. I think, again, adjusting expectations somewhat, a little bit of repeat there. And two suggestions: watch how you think. And two things I'd encourage you to pay attention to is be mindful of all or nothing thinking. Something doesn't go well at the meeting, and you say the whole meeting was a disaster. It's either everything goes well or nothing is okay. Or another way to talk about what we do with our thinking is we overgeneralize. A couple of sisters said to you they didn't like what happened at the meeting, and you say to yourself, no one thinks the meeting was a good meeting. So watch all or nothing thinking or overgeneralizing, saying no one, everyone. One sister comes and says, I'm having difficulty with you, and you say to yourself, everyone thinks I'm not a good leader. Watch what we do mentally, which cause us more difficulty. I think record what you're thinking, write it down, get it out, and see what it is that you might be able to do something about. Sometimes we don't even think about, oh, I'm disappointed in this. Well, what can I do about that? Or I'm not happy about that interaction. Well, what can I learn so that I can have a better interaction next? So we get some choices in there. I know this next one may sound a little simple, but smile. It sometimes can help us It can make us feel good inside. And I'm not talking about avoiding, I'm talking about just being able to kind of smile, you know, that sometimes things aren't as bad as we think, it just can help us. Now, this next piece, sadness and grief. Wow. Um, let me say one thing at the very beginning. Sadness and grief are not just happening in our older women. Let me say that again. Sadness and grief are not just happening in our elders, in our older women. You do not want to miss the fact that our younger members also are dealing with sadness and grief. It may not be the same. And so remember, and the other thing I'd like to point out is sadness is probably one of the hardest things the human person copes with. This is a challenge for us. So you're sad because you lose something that's valuable to you. And the more sadness that you feel, it tells you how valuable that person, that situation, that thing is to you. So sadness can have degrees, and the more that you are sad, it tells you how. I always say the degree of sadness is related to the degree of love. So if you loved a person dearly and you lose them for whatever reason, then your sadness will be more intense. So when we experience loss, we suffer. And this is one of the hardest things that the human person experiences. We need help. We need comfort. And listen to this. We also need to do more of our grieving together. And I said this yesterday when we talked about lamenting, that you have personal laments, personal things that you're sorry about. But when you let go of a mother house, when you close a ministry that you've been in for years, that's more than one person's grief, one person's loss. And so we need to do communal rituals. We need to have communal grieving to help us let go. Now, when we talk about the death of a loved one, it's so clear that loss is there and sadness is there. And we kind of realize how hard that is. But there are a wide variety of losses. And I tried to list them here for us to kind of walk through. And I'm going to ask you to think about your own life personally. If you can do your work, you can accompany your sisters better. So, what happens when you lose someone you love? Notice it says you can blame someone. Sometimes when a person dies after an illness, we want to blame the doctors. The doctors didn't do enough. Because it's so hard to deal with loss, we turn to anger and blame. They're trying to substitute for the loss because loss is difficult to deal with. Sometimes we blame ourselves, or we feel guilty, or we have regrets. I should have seen her more. I should have talked to her more. I should have, and we hear all the regrets and the blaming of self. They are a way of distracting from the loss and the loss and this great sadness that we feel. So loss can be, notice it says, loss can be loss of stature. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. You were the principal of the school and now you're not. So now you're a teacher and not the person in charge, loss of stature. You can lose hope. You're saying, I don't have it, and we have to be careful of that in the world around us. And the Pope Francis is asking us to be women of hope, even in the midst of war and destruction. You can lose if somebody doesn't trust you or you don't trust someone else. That's a loss that's very difficult to deal with. Health, we talked about, is, and our older women are dealing with health issues, but so too can younger women deal with health issues, needing surgery, for example. Those are difficult situations. Companionship, losing a friendship, moving from one place of ministry to another, you let go of the familiar, let go of your bedroom, let go. These are all losses that take time to adjust. And sometimes we lose something material, something that we loved and it gets lost and we feel the loss. So notice the questions I asked here for you to think about. And I'd ask you to just think about yourself right now. You can use these with your sisters as well. What have I lost? And you may have lost more than one thing. What's real? How big is this loss? What is the value to me? When my mother died, the one thing I had of her was her rosary. And I would touch it and remember her. And somehow it got lost. So this piece of my mother, it was how I remembered and connected with her. It's not the same as losing a pen that I like. Was this my loss or was it someone else's loss? Sometimes we feel lost because someone else, one of our sisters, a friend, a family member, loses their spouse, for example, and we are connected to them. This notion of being insulted. If somebody doesn't speak to me, do you feel that you've lost some dignity? Do you feel humiliated? And let me give you a real example. I was working with a sister who left leadership. She finished her term, okay, which is a good thing. And here's the story she told me. She said she was back at the mother house to attend a funeral of another sister. And she got out of her car. Here she lived in the US. And she was walking toward the mother house to attend the wake and the funeral of one of her sisters. She said another sister came out of the mother house and was walking toward her. So she's here, and the other person, you get the picture. The other person, she's walking to the door, and the other person is walking toward her. So the sister who's telling me this story said she smiled at the other sister, and the other sister was sort of gesturing, like opening her arms, like for a hug, And she said, the sister coming toward her walked right by her to the person in the car, getting out of the car behind her, which was the new leader. She did not say hello to the former leader. She walked right by her to hug the new leader. She said to me, I felt I was a nobody. I felt ridiculous, humiliated, because I thought she was greeting me. She didn't even say hello. She walked right by me to the new leader. Wow. I don't have any dignity. I feel like I'm a nobody. That was a very difficult situation for her. And she talked about it with me. And here's one of the things that she learned to kind of look at the situation differently. Instead of saying, I'm not okay, I'm not good enough. Uh, you know what she said, and this is true for you leaders. You got to pay attention. She said, you know, some people change their connection as soon as you're not in office. If I was still in leadership, she would have greeted me. But I'm not in leadership, so she greets the new leader. And she said, I realized it wasn't about me. It was about how this person relates to people in power, in leadership, and doesn't even see people as people. Wow, what a learning. Hmm? Do you feel powerless? Do you feel like you don't have anything to say about your life? Do you feel cheated? Were you forced to do something you didn't want to do and you did it? Did you, and here's a very important thing, sisters, did you agree to something you really didn't want to agree with? Try not to be pressured into agreement. Maybe what you need to say is, I need to think about that. Sometimes we get pressured to agree and then we feel terrible about ourselves. If somebody threatens or attacks or abuses, those are all about them, not about you. And then if your boundaries have been crossed, if somebody violates your personal space, your life, you can feel that loss, but remember, it is about them and their behavior, not because you are not worthy. Loss. One of the most difficult and complicated things that we deal with. So I want to talk about sadness again, and I want to talk about sadness and depression. Sadness can last for a few minutes or days or hours, but when it extends over weeks and weeks and weeks, it could be that you've turned the sadness in and that you're depressed, feeling blue, feeling no energy. And that's when you want to get some help here. You don't want to be walking around with no energy and nothing seems right, and you've kind of lost your ability to live in the moment. Now, what do we know about grief? Grief is very complicated. Let me say one sentence. If you don't remember anything else, remember this. Grief is more than one feeling. Grief is more than one feeling. When we grieve, what we're trying to do is cope with or prevent the loss. We don't want to face the loss. So one of the first feelings of grief is anger. And what does anger do? Pushes away the loss. And then we're anxious and said, I wish I could have done this. And then we're hopeful, maybe it didn't happen, and then we feel guilty or we regret. All of those are complex feelings because we're having a hard time accepting the loss. Wow. Wow. What a hard thing for us to deal with loss. And so when you find yourself being angry and regretful and blaming, realize you're trying to cope with a loss you'd rather not have. So a couple of reminders. You and I, we all have to deal with challenging emotions in our everyday life, in our personal life, and in your work, in your role as leaders. Learning how to name your feelings, understand them, and express them in healthy ways is absolutely essential. And if you can do it with you, you'll be able to walk with your sisters who also have complicated, difficult feelings. Listen to this next sentence. Emotions can be contagious and can spread. So if you're angry all the time, it'll spread. The other people in leadership with you will be angry. Anger will become the number one feeling that the community expresses. And nobody wants to be around someone who is angry all the time or frustrated all the time or disappointed all the time. You can have those feelings. You just don't want them to be the only feelings you feel. And then one other thought. Your emotions are yours. Yes, people do and say things and you respond. That's true. But they don't cause them. So, what types of feelings do you face most often? You might want to get a little list. Remember, yesterday we talked about doing a feeling check at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, just to see what keeps coming up. And what keeps coming up is you want to look at it and say, wow, are those the only feelings I want, in my life? So, and when feelings, you also have to say is what emotions are from the past. And here's a good example. Sisters, I think fear can be something from your past. Maybe growing up, your family situation was unsettled, difficult. And so fear, not feeling safe, that's what fear is, not feeling safe, was something you experienced a lot of, or one of your sisters that you're accompanying is fearful most of the time. She learned that. And so, how do we kind of understand that and how to perhaps help her or get her some help so that fear is not the dominant feeling in her life today? So, it's so important to know who we learned to be. There's my question. And who we are called to be now. And that means learning some new ways to deal with our emotions, our feelings. So let's stop for a moment here. And we have an opportunity for some comments, clarifications, and questions. And then I want to talk about the difference between responding and reacting, because this can be very helpful for you as a leader. You want to respond to your sisters, not react to them. So that's coming. But what have you heard so far today? What is helpful? What comments do you have, or what questions do you have?
Thank you so much, Lynn. So as Lynn has suggested, we stop for 2 minutes of silence to recall what we have heard today and what is that one thing or two things that we want to listen more deeply. And at the same time, if you want to place some questions please write them on the chat or then raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. So let's just pause for 2 minutes. Our 2 minutes have gone very quickly, time goes. So we have one hand raised. Hermana Balbina, si abres el micrófono, por favor. No sé si lo puedes hacer.
Can you unmute yourself? I thank Link for what she's shared. It is very practical, very applicable to everyday life. I think you're a very practical woman. So I thank you very much for this. And one thing that I take away is this thing about not thinking about everything or nothing. It's perhaps sometimes, or as you said, some people on occasion to not go to the extremes. This is something that I keep, that I take away, and it's helpful. I felt in sync when you said it, how to avoid suffering and uncomfortable situations. If you only see and face things in their appropriate place. So thank you for this sharing that is very practical. And also about getting ready to leave. I've been 10 and a half years in this service, and I'm precisely preparing my heart for this to leave. And I'm very interested in the first conferences, if the next one's Paola, or about how to leave with dignity from this service, because I dream of myself being fruitful, healthy, and contributing from wherever I am, and I don't want to picture myself uncomfortable. My I had my experience of seeing this. So, Paula, if we can face some topics about how to leave our leadership positions in the best possible way and stay healthy and fruitful to continue contributing to the kingdom's project in this congregation.
Gracias, Malvina.
Thank you so
I don't know,
much.
Lynn, if you would like to comment anything, or you continue to tell me.
Yeah, well, thank you for your comment. I think the last talked about leaving leadership is an important topic, and we know some things that can be helpful. So I hope we can do something for sisters interested, even if you're not leaving for a year or two, to begin to think about, how to prepare to leave is a good thing, and letting go of a major role is a significant event in your life, and I think we can be helpful. The first thing you talked about is, how we think about things impacts how we feel. And so that's that all or nothing thinking or overgeneralizing, nobody likes me. The meeting was terrible. There was nothing good about the meeting. And we kill ourselves with that kind of thinking. And by the way, those are called cognitive distortions. And they are a major cause of depression as well. Not only do they impact our functioning, but they can lead to depression. So thank you for your comments. And I hope we can do what you asked.
Yes, I was thinking that in June we are preparing a pre-retirement session. So with Mary Pat Garvin, that's something not only for leaving leadership, but when age starts coming and we have to leave any role. But again, we will think about specifically on leadership. Thank you,
Right.
Balvina. Let's do this. So there was another hand, but I seem it has disappeared. So if the sister would like to raise the hand, I have some questions here, Lynn. Some sisters ask and say that you've spoken about these negative, that are not negative, but these uncomfortable, more unpleasant feelings. What about joy? What about compassion? Can you speak a little bit about that? Because sometimes we don't even know how to feel those feelings, to sit with them, to enjoy them. It's like we only want to manage the not so easy ones. But what about these other parts that it's so important also?
Well, I can speak to joy first. I think we do know some things about joy, and some of them, there's like steps we can take to be more joyful in our personal and our communal life. Believe it or not, the first couple of steps are what we have been talking about, and then we'll add a few things. The first step is naming the reality honestly. You can't pretend that this is not difficult or this is challenging and everything. So when we name the reality honestly, this is challenging. This is a good thing. This meeting went well. This discussion was challenging. So naming the reality honestly, and not just looking for the difficult parts, but or our celebration for jubilees was joyful. So naming the reality honestly is step one. Step two, interestingly enough, it's the best thing you can do in order to really promote or live a more joyful life, is to accept what is and not be resigned to what is. Now, let me explain that. Accept what is and not being resigned to what is. When you accept the reality, let's talk about a difficult meeting. You say, that meeting was difficult for us. For me, it was difficult for the leadership group. That's important to say. Not being resigned, resignation says, well, and there's nothing we can do now. There's nothing we can do. It's sort of everything is over. So acceptance is important. The meeting didn't go as well as we had hoped. And that's the word you want to use. And what did we learn? How would we make some adjustments? What next steps? So sometimes when something doesn't go well, we then move to, there's nothing we can do. We kind of get stuck. Whereas if you can say, and what did we learn? What can we do? What's next? The third one is a big one, a big thing in order to experience joy. And that is practice gratitude. Practice gratitude. That doesn't mean, oh, every once in a while, you might say, well, I got a nice letter from one of the sisters. Isn't that nice? No, it means every single day. Every single day. Pause and be grateful for one thing, for three things, for whatever. Sometimes keeping a little notebook near your bed so that before you go off to sleep, you write 5 things you are grateful for. Practicing gratitude means it becomes a habit of the mind. Practicing gratitude. Our house is warm and we have both shelter and food and we're cared for. Sometimes we have to be grateful for ordinary things. Practice gratitude. The fourth one is, it really is becoming, what's the word I want to use? I think it's more of, living with what is, in a way of, how do I want to say that? Fostering relationships with ourselves and others. It really is communion, what Pope Francis talks about. Living in communion with the earth, with nature, with one another, with the people of God. So I think it's a relational life is how this happens, that joy can be, and appreciating the relational life. And then I think the last thing I would say is living more simply. Living more simply. That what we have is enough. Not always seeking more. The next computer, the next phone, the next whatever. So there is a simplicity that helps us to live in a more joyful way. So I hope those are some steps, some things to consider that we know can help us. And I want to make sure you highlight the gratitude. I think we don't even notice all that we have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn, for helping us to be grateful in our joy, to be more joyful in our gratitude. It's so important when we focus sometimes only in the negative in our lives. There's so many positives and real things. So there's a simple question, I don't know if it's so simple, about do you make a difference between feelings and emotions? Is there a difference between that?
Yeah, as some people do. There is some, we could be a little technical about it. I just choose to talk about them. I usually talk about feelings, but what I said refers to, them. So there are some technical differences. I just don't feel that they're worth us explaining. But yes, you can see how people make some distinctions. I just think the things that we talked about are the feelings that are so much important that we understand and be able to live with. Not to in any way put down are there differences, it's
yes, something that sometimes can be technical or can be more helpful or not. Yes. So this sister asks again, when you say that there's no right answer but the best answer, but sometimes in our communities, in the way we perceive spirituality, in the way we perceive consecrated life, there is this ideal, or there's still this right way of doing things. So how to handle the tension when we need to think about the answers to give, and we still would like to aim for the ideal response, the right one.
Well, for me personally, I think it's helpful to let go that there is a right answer. I think there's something about that kind of hits the whole question of perfect, and you have to keep kind of aiming, striving for that thing that's probably untouchable. So I'm not saying don't be idealistic or don't be, reach for the best possible. I just don't think in many situations, complex situations, there is the right answer. What I prefer to encourage is together. That's a critical word. Together. What decisions can we come to together and support based on our spirituality, based on our understanding, all of that? And then let us make that decision and see where it takes us. I think together, embracing, using our values, using what matters, choosing, and seeing where it takes us. I think that's a better pathway. There is a right answer, and we just have to find it.
Thank you, Lynn. There's a question that I'm just going to say it as it is, translating it. How not to allow ourselves to be affected when certain emotions or feelings affect the community, the fraternity. That's the comment, the question. So please understand it as you understand it. I'm going to leave it like that.
Okay. Well, if I understood correctly, how not to be impacted or affected. Maybe that's not the question. Maybe the question is, if you're going to be an empathic leader, you understand and are impacted by the emotion, the feelings of your sisters. So if they're dealing with sadness because of the loss of a mother house, or they're feeling fear because the situation they live in is dangerous, we want to be able to acknowledge and realize those are genuine feelings in response to a real situation. You don't have to take it on with the same degree. You don't have to feel and be overwhelmed by the fear, for example, or the sadness. Yet we do have to understand how real those feelings are. And so I don't think I want to not be aware of them or not acknowledge them. I think you want to be able to say, this is this new territory that we're in, to be with, so that the emotional response is respected and honored. And only then, when people can feel what they feel, the stress comes down. And then we can begin to look at rational, what do we do now? But I think we move too quickly to what we do or how to fix without acknowledging, okay, it's okay to be afraid here. That's pretty genuine feeling. And being sad that this mother house is no longer ours is a genuine response to a law. Those are all good and holy. Once we can be there's the psychological safety. That's safety. Then we can say, how do we help each other? Maybe then we talk about rituals again. And maybe then we talk about community gatherings that talk more about how to help one, maybe then we do a lamentation, everybody, maybe then. But sometimes we have to just be with, and we create that emotional space, that safe space.
So we do have to allow feelings to impact us, and sometimes we would like to have them away. So it's what you've been saying, how to welcome them, naming and dealing with them, nurture them so that they can be part of me and of others. So again, some very interesting question is, we are people from different backgrounds and there are different emotional responses. So how can we be aware of that? How can we empathize with other sisters, taking into account that probably different feelings are expressed and lived differently?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is this whole area of intercultural communication and just a couple of principles. It's a profound question, I think we make assumptions that we make assumptions, and we need to stop. I've heard people say, well, we're all human. Yeah, that's true, but that doesn't mean I come at the situation the same way you do. We wipe out differences, which is not helpful. And so I think the whole question of intercultural living, for those of you who live with multicultures in your community, and stereotyping and assumptions and not understanding the nonverbal communication, for example, people, they don't mean the same thing. We have Japanese sisters. And when I was the general leader and visiting Japan, there would be silence at times. Now, sometimes you can assume silence means agreement. But I learned that silence with some of our Japanese sisters does not mean agreement. It means they are needing to figure out how to respond when they don't agree, especially with a person in authority. They respect authority much more than Americans do. So I learned to get out of their way so they could have more personal conversations. So the silence then was an opportunity for them to talk to one another without an authority figure being there. So there are some rules, some suggestions about intercultural communication. Nonverbals is one. Don't assume they mean the same thing. Language issues, idioms, slang are not understood in the same way. So there are some things. If you have a intercultural life, learning about just the communication part of that can be very helpful, because otherwise we make assumptions. And the other thing you have to be careful of is stereotyping. Those sisters from X, they do this, and we put the sisters from X country in a box when they remain individuals from that country. So lots of potential there for misinterpreting. If you don't mind, I'd like to go to that last piece, and then we can come back to questions.
I think that's...
I have found this very helpful, because although I like to think I respond to others, I have watched myself react to them. So let me give you an example, and then I'm going to walk through what's on your paper about a little process to help you to learn to respond, not react. The example I'm going to give is, you have, I'll use a new member example. You have a new member who joins a particular local community, and she's living there, and she's newer to the community. And the community has been together for several years. So they like to do things in certain ways. You know, we do this in the morning, we do this, this is how we pray together, this is whatever. And so this new member, she makes a suggestion. She says, I wonder if we could change how we do that. I wonder if we could do this in another way. And it could be something about the prayer schedule. It could be something about when mass happens. She's not wanting to do that. She's offering a different time or a different opportunity. Really, if you remember yesterday, she's moved into that contributor safety mode where she says, I would like to contribute. I'd like to offer another possibility. And what happens is several of the sisters who've been in the community, who are longer members, live there together, one of them says, who is she? Who is she to tell us or to ask us to change how we do things? Or another one gets really quiet, but resents the fact that a new member would offer something different. So, anger, who is she? Resentment, those are reactions. They're not responses. So let me walk through this little thing to help you understand how we can move away from reacting to responding. The first thing is this, it says, we really want to be able to walk with each other. And so the word in English is RAIN, or the word rain. And it works in English. So when you translate, you don't get that neat little word rain, but the principles are the same. So what are the steps to learn how to respond, not react? The first thing is important that you be able to recognize, that's what the first word is, recognize that you feel anger, resentment, frustration. So in other words, you name your own feelings and you realize they're yours. So recognizing your things, recognizing you don't like what's happening, recognizing that you're judging the other, who is she? Who is she to suggest this? Or I resent the fact that a new member can say something. So with recognize, you do this. You ask yourself, what is really going on here? What is really going on in me? Not about her, in me. What am I feeling? And I say the feelings of resentment, of anger are mine. Step 2 says allow and accept. So being gentle with yourself, you say, what's going on in me? And so we become, without judgment, we breathe and we say, wow, I'm frustrated, I'm reacting. And you say that to yourself, I'm reacting. And I'm being judgmental here. And I want to push her away. I want it to stop. So you allow and accept what is happening without judgment. The third step is the I in the rain thing, investigate. And then you really say, what's really happening within me? Where are these feelings coming from? And you say, I have felt these before. These are not new feelings. I feel somebody is interfering in my life. There's uncertainty. And so part of investigating is saying, when I react, it's because I have a history with some of these same circumstances. This is not new for me. So you're learning about yourself. And then the last question, in addition to saying, okay, I see a little history here, I see a pattern, you ask a very important question. What do I need right now? What do I need? What do I need so that I can be okay in a situation like this? So that's investigate. And you answer yourself in the fourth step, which is nurture. And so you say, I need to be gentler with myself. I need to give myself a hug. I need to be able to say, I matter. I'm important. And so really, and that you can say to yourself, being upset with her or being asked to do something different, I'm not out of control. I have something to say about my life. What this does is help you to be more centered in yourself so that the next time something happens and somebody says, can we change this? You don't have a reaction and try to protect yourself and think that that somebody's challenging you and that you're not okay. You're much calmer within, and you can begin to hear what she's asking. You don't even have to agree. It doesn't mean you just give in and agree, but you don't have the reaction. You're able to say to the person, well, let's talk more about that. What is it that you'd like? Help me understand. Now listen to that question. That's a very important question for leaders. Help me understand your suggestion. I'm not reacting. I'm not angry. I'm not frustrated. I'm not judging myself. I'm able to be in a relationship with you. Help me understand. The only way we get to be able to do this and stop reacting is by learning from a reaction who we are and how to be able to handle some of those emotions. And we practice so that the next time it gets easier and the next time it gets easier. So responding, not reacting, is a really important tool for leaders. Really, it's an important tool for every human person. Notice the feelings are mine. I try to understand where they come from. I nurture what I need, and I'm able then to be able to respond to others in a better way. So just a suggestion, a process that you might use.
Thank you, Lynn. I suggest we sit with this last insight you gave us on how to learn to respond instead of reacting, allowing it to reign over us. So that the spirit and also our insight, our inner world can be expressed and known. So let's sit for 1 or 2 minutes and then we will resume with our questions. So, Lynn, one of the questions that came before we resumed this last moment was, how can we relate and integrate all these learnings or these insights you're giving us of difficult relationships or difficult handling of our feelings, and also the good ones, with our relationship with God? How to bring this spiritual side of us and this human side of us together? How to integrate all this? I know it's a very big question, but if you could give some insights, please.
Well, I like to think about it. We only have one journey, and it is a psycho-spiritual journey to God. That's the journey everyone is on, a psycho-spiritual journey to God. And for me, spirituality is a lifelong journey of making writing, correcting my relationship with myself, with others, and with God. So anytime we do work emotionally to understand and make a better relationship with our emotional life, it is the journey toward God, because my relationship with myself, my relationship with others, my relationship with God is the journey. So that's one insight that I try to live out of. The second part to that, and again, it may not be touching exactly. The second thing is, I think we do not pray our emotions, our feelings to God. We do not share them with God. I mean, there have been times, I have a brother who was in a horrible accident. There are times I want to say to God, why? Why? Or why him? Or hasn't he suffered enough? I think talking to God emotionally is something we have not learned to do. I think we need to be much more emotionally expressive with God. We have a big enough God who can hear. And now some people want to say, well, God already knows. Well, guess what? God may know, but I need to say it. So I think sometimes we have withheld from our prayer life the real journey that we're on, and really begging God, as the Psalms do, to help us, to walk with us, to accompany us, to help me, to help you, to help us. So I think, to not separate the psychological journey from the spiritual journey, it's all one, and that our emotional life is integral to that. So praying our emotions, I think, can be very helpful. And so that's just a little bit of how I'd respond. But also the fact that the journey of becoming my best self is the spiritual journey that I'm asked, that God calls me to. And one of that is about emotional integration and understanding.
Thank you so much, Lynn. We need to fill our world as well with God and allow our feelings to be part of our relationship with God. One of the sisters asks a very straightforward question, and I think it's very deep. How can you enlighten me on the fact that anxiety, restlessness is an act of imagination in a country where there is a lot of uncertainty, and we have lots of communities there? So you were saying that sometimes worry is something that we create or we think of, the way we think, but then there's the reality that life is uncertain, that life throws challenges at us that worry us. So how can we balance that, please? Thank you.
Well, there's a difference between anxiety and worry. And so I think that might help a little. That anxiousness is really your response to uncertainty. And that, you're right. I mean, the sister who said that, I mean, some of the situations you live in and your sisters live in are highly anxious situations. That they are, I mean, we have, war, we have economic situations, we have, lack of basics of food, clothing, shelter, all of that's going on. So anxiety is in relationship to the uncertainty that exists, with all of those things. I think the thing that might be helpful is to look at, we have given control, or the idea of being in control, a major place in our life. We kind of hold that up as the thing, to be in control, when really what we need to be able to do is have the flexibility and the adaptability to go with what is. And so if you have a high need for control, then your life becomes even more challenging because of the high need for control. So I think we've made control sort of a god, when really we really need to be able to be more adaptable, more flow. The worry thing, when we talk about worry, is an act of imagination. And so it's not to say, our sisters don't have enough to eat. We're not pretending that's not true. That's an anxiety. That's a real life issue that we have to face. But worrying about it doesn't change the fact. So we want to take some of our energy that we put into worry and to begin to say, how else, what choices do we have that might alleviate the lack of hunger or the lack of resources or whatever. So they're not exactly the same, but that sisters are anxious about the kind of ambiguity and uncertainty that their sisters live with in certain populations is absolutely right on. The question is, what do you do with the anxiety? And what we're trying to do sometimes is control situations versus adapt and respond. So those are nuances. So I hope the sister hears. She's absolutely right. If they're anxious about certain situations in the countries where her sisters live, she should be. Those are anxiety producing. It's the question of putting all your energy into worry, which doesn't change anything and doesn't give you the freedom to look at options.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn, for making the distinct separation, the difference. Another question. On one hand, you say that our emotions belong to us, and others are not the responsibles, the cause of that reality. But then on the other side, you say that they can be contagious. So can you enlighten that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, I think it comes from the basic understanding that my feelings are mine. And so I don't believe other people cause them. However, if you live in an environment where fear is the dominant feeling, and that's all we talk about is fear and anxiousness, etc., I can begin to take that on because that's what I live with every day. That's what I hear. That's what I experience. So it's contagion is you can catch it because it's the environment or the culture. And that's what we're trying to say. Don't make it the culture, and help people to realize, and this is the critical piece, that we have choices. And by the way, if you don't believe you have choices, you can't be hopeful. One of the only ways you can have hope in your life is to believe you have choice. So it impacts hope then too.
Thank you. Can you comment a little bit more on the balance between professional life or leadership role, as you called it, and the personal life? You spoke about the need of not letting go of a personal life beyond the task and the role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think leadership has so many demands, and it's bigger than what one person can, or even a group of women can do. So I think sometimes we get sloppy, or we forget that we need to have an annual retreat, and that unless there's an absolute emergency, your retreat does not get interrupted. You need to be able to take a weekend off. You need to be able to enjoy relaxation if it's with your family, a family visit, or I think the most important one is with adult friends. Who are your friends and who can you just kind of be with? Now, if your friends are in the community, it becomes a little challenging that you can't say certain things to them because they are members, and you can't talk about situations to a member, you know, especially if it involves another member. So that's why what we said yesterday comes back into the picture. And that is, who can you talk to? Who can you be so honest with? Who do you share that you don't hold anything back with? And is that a mentor, someone outside of the community, someone that, you know, that has the ability to be objective? So I think it's a combination of all those things. And then, of course, you need to know what self-care looks like for you. If it means going for a walk every day, go for a walk. You know, if it means an extra half hour of quiet reflection, you make the extra half hour of quiet reflection. You need to know about self-care in order to be resilient. And resilience means the ability to respond to whatever comes. So it'll be personal, it'll be individual, and you need to know and name and claim what is that keeps you healthy and on a journey toward God and your humanity. So figure it out and then build it in. And only in absolute crisis do you let them go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really need to learn as well what gives us life and energy and how to foster that. So another question, can you dwell a little bit more and explain, you've mentioned it very few times, rituals. How can that help managing difficult situations or difficult feelings in community?
Yeah. Well, we know that each sister is on an individual journey, but we are also on a communal journey. And as a people, ritual is a part of what it means to be a human person. And that's not just because we're sisters or because we're Catholic, but rituals are a part of most cultures. And the rituals help the community to celebrate, to mourn, to whatever the major emotions are. So rituals are critical. And we need to figure out what the rituals are for a particular situation. I worked with a group of sisters who were letting go of their mother house. And what each sister did was to write down on a leaf, it looked like a leaf that belonged to a tree, what that house meant, what that particular provincial center meant to her. And when they came, so they had individual memories and individual losses. And then they came together as a group, and each sister put her leaf on this tree so that the tree became full of leaves of all these personal remembrances of the mother house, and etc. And that became where they helped each other grieve and to see that it isn't exactly the same, and yet we're in this together. Another one, a group I worked with, they wrote lamentations, individual laments about where they were in the letting go of different parts of their life. And only in the reading of the sisters wrote the lamentations. And in some ways, interestingly enough, they didn't experience a lot of emotion when they wrote them, but when they said them out loud, when they prayed them out loud with each other, the feelings came forward and the touching of one another and the connection to others became so powerful and so helpful for them. So we are people of ritual. We celebrate, that's a ritual. We mourn, we bury people with ritual, and we need to have rituals of letting go.
As you were speaking, Lynn, thank you so much. It was coming to me, this creating safe spaces to express our emotions, our inner worlds, this hospitality you started with yesterday. So rituals sometimes can help to create that reality.
Right.
So we have two more comments, and then we will wrap it up. This sister, it's not a question, but I think it's an enlightening comment. I get angry when I don't feel listened to. And I have discovered the roots of these in my history. And so I think the anger is created by the other person not listening to me. Somehow now I think the sister is realizing that it's bringing up memories, bringing up attitudes, past realities. That's so important. Would you like to comment?
Yes, I think that, sisters, we've all had difficult experiences, or even I'll use the word trauma from in the past, and something in the present touches back to that, and we kind of react to the present with a lot of emotion. Really, we're carrying stuff from the past. When you weren't listened to as a child, you couldn't do much. You were little. You could only take it and not do much. As an adult, you want to react, you want to, stop. So part of what we're dealing with in the present is leftover from the past. And if you can realize that, then you can do something to understand what happened, even to mourn, to grieve that you weren't listened to as a little one, and how that is impacting your life. And you can begin to live more fully in the present and not having the past be the dictator of the present.
Thank you. So we can relearn how we respond to old things. So last question here, it's a Spanish question, so I'm going to try to translate it because it plays on the words. So worry in English, that we can say as well, preoccupation, is the misuse of occupation, this person was told. So it helps her to place herself there in the occupation. When I recognize that I'm preoccupied, then I'm worrying, channeling my mind and energies towards what is possible with creativity. So over to you, Lynn.
Well, just to say that it's to say to live in the present moment is the only thing where we have any ability to live fully and freely. So to live in that moment, the present moment, not worry takes us to the future, to what if, So I think if I understood somewhat, I think she's saying that too, And the only other thing I would say is, and it's sort of at the end of the handout, but in learning to be more emotionally aware and able to deal with our own emotional life, we can be more available to our sisters. And I think, that over and over again, we become more fully human, more aware, more kind, more compassionate, more understanding, and really freer, which is really, really what all of us desire, to not be bound up, but to be free. So what a great opportunity to be together. I just want to thank you for showing up. And hopefully we'll see each other again at another time.
Yes, I'm sure we have another session with you soon this year, where we'll be looking at other realities. Thank you for showing up, Lynn. Thank you so much for taking the time to prepare to share with us your wisdom, so grounded on reality. And I think that's so important and so practical, because sometimes we say, okay, we need to feel our feelings, but we don't know how to do with them. Allowing God as well to embrace us in everything we live. We are fully human because God created us human. And sometimes I think we want to be angels. I don't know what we want to be. So the chat is full and it's coming up again with so many thank you messages. So thank you. There's so much, and allowing this reign of the spirit of ourselves to reign over us, and really to pray for each other in these task that we have to be human, to be women, and for the ones who are here who have to be leaders. That's so beautiful to understand that God as well gives us the grace that we need. So I invite you to open the microphones. Before that, just to say that I will send you another email with all the handouts and with the evaluation link. I will do that next week. and also our technical team, whenever they have the time, they will put the recordings online on our USG YouTube channel. So it's a little bit more of work because it has to be edited. And again, thank you to our translators that have been tireless, Daniela, Christine, and Marilu. And thank you to everyone. Thank you for your presence, for your encouragement. And I will invite you to share this, to reread, to re-listen, and to share these with your leadership teams and with your sisters. Please do so, because there's a lot of wisdom that we cannot take in one go. We need to repeat, we need to revisit. So thank you so much. Thank you, Florence, as well, for your help and the technical team. And see you soon. Bye-bye. Please do open your microphones and we can say goodbye and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Grazie,
Merci so
merci.
much.
Merci,
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Lynn.
Merci beaucoup à tous.
Gracias.
Grazie mille.
Trabalha, Lynn.
Obrigada.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Merci.